This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Hello and welcome to The Edge, Trek FM show about Star Trek Discovery, in which we discuss whatever there is to talk about in the world of Discovery when there's not a new episode of Discovery on. And this week we're going to kind of take a look at something which is from the era of Discovery, even though it's not part of the series itself. But we'll get into that in a second. Before we do, my name is Mike, and I'm here today with all three of my lovely Edge co-hosts. Over in the desert, we've got Amy. How's it going, Amy?
Doing good, keeping warm.
And then up in the Arctic lands of Canada, we've got Brandon.
The women!
And then over on that little island, which is about to break off from the mainland and float away into the Pacific, we have Aaron. How's it going, Aaron?
It's going well. I'm excited to get the state moving away.
Didn't you hear me? The women!
Thanks, Shouty Spock.
So, yes, as Shouty Spock may indicate, today we are going to be discussing The Cage, which is the very first episode of Star Trek, at least the first one to be produced. And we thought that would be a cool thing to talk about for a couple of reasons. One, happy birthday, Star Trek. It's September 8th if you're listening to this the day it's released. So,
Woohoo!
51 years ago today, another episode, which is not this one, debuted. And also, this episode takes
TAS's
place...
anniversary, too. The animated
Oh,
series.
yeah.
It is. Yes.
That doesn't count. Yeah, so, and then...
Remember, there is an animated
It was nice
Star
seeing
Trek.
you. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.
I just wanted to get,
Uh-huh.
Aaron's,
Sure. Uh-huh.
response. But yes, okay, so what were we talking about? Oh yeah, The Cage.
The animated series.
So, yes, and here's the other thing about The Cage is it takes place 2 years before Discovery. So it's like Discovery era Trek, which I think is pretty cool. And I think it's also kind of cool because, chronologically speaking, in terms of the timeline, this is the last thing that occurred before Discovery starts. So, is this Discovery episode 0? No, but for our purposes, why not, right?
Yes, I didn't know this. This is new information. Thank you.
All right. So, also, you need to kind of watch this in order to prep for David Mack's upcoming Discovery novel, Desperate Hours, right? Because he's going to kind of merge the two together in some sort of weird, cool thing.
Did you see the new the subtitle to that novel? Desperate Hours. The women!
There you go. There you go. So, what we're going to be doing today is an audio commentary for The Cage. So, if you've got a version of The Cage, and it's slightly longer than an hour and 3 minutes, and it doesn't matter whether you're watching the original effects or the new effects. If you go to Netflix, you'll see the original effects, which is pretty cool and everything. It doesn't matter; it'll all sync up. But set that counter to 0, and we're going to get this started up in a few seconds. If you're not watching, that's totally okay. You'll be able to follow along without it because, it works. Who cares? We're just talking about Star Trek, guys. Everyone's seen The Cage, right?
Yes, I'm
Amy?
sure everyone has seen The Cage, has it memorized, know the scenes and the acts by heart.
Great. Well, in that
Excellent,
case, let's get this thing started up. We're at 0 on the counter, and if everyone
Before we get started,
is-
can I just say a quick something here to one of our listeners?
Oh, yes, please, Brandon.
Are you going to say the women?
No,
or,
not the women. No, actually, it's
Okay.
our good friend Cedric, who's been tweeting in French about our stuff. I think he's in Paris, and he's like, or France or somewhere, and he's listening. So everybody on the edge just wants to say, "Bonjour, Cedric. Comment ça va? Ça va bien."
Cool.
Well, and
All
I
right.
think we should let our listeners know that there's going to be a special announcement at the end of this. So don't just turn us off and say, oh, I'm not going to listen. You'll want to listen to the end.
Yeah. Now they're all going to scan forward an hour and 3
No,
minutes because they don't
listen.
care about the cage. Okay, yeah. We might do the announcement right in the middle somewhere, so you better listen to the whole thing just in case. All right. So if you guys are ready, we're at 0 on the counter, and I'm going to give a countdown.
I was
3,
born
2,
ready,
1,
Nick.
start. And then we're going to start this up. All ready? 3, 2, 1, start. And there's some stars as this thing fades up, and we are into Star Trek for the very first time. There goes the Enterprise flying by, so that everyone kind of has an idea of the sync here. And there, the Enterprise goes flying by again, and we are into this thing. Okay,
And if you have the new
Star
effects, you
Trek.
have a nebula that was taken by the Hubble telescope.
oh cool,
Really?
cool.
Yep.
I don't have the new effects.
Me either.
Who's this Jeffrey Hunter guy?
He was in a movie called
Does the ship
A
just
Guide
disappear?
for the Married Man. Yes, it did. Okay, so what I think is interesting about this, and what I think we should kind of look at in this commentary, is sort of
I love this scene.
what we're seeing in relation to what we know and what we think we know about Discovery.
I'm just
For
so
example,
upset about these special
these
effects.
costumes.
Look at these effects. I can't believe they modified the effects for the new show. I expected Discovery to look just like this.
Yeah, and the sets and everything like that. But I mean, the costumes. Now, here's an interesting thing, and I'm very curious to get your take on this, Aaron, because okay, you look at the JJ movies and the costumes, which are those took place in the same era costume-wise, but obviously they didn't use these costumes. And to me, I didn't really have a big problem with that in terms of the JJ movies because, yes, obviously everything is going to be updated, but also I feel like the whole point of those movies was to sort of get back to the iconography of Star Trek. So even though it does take place at this point in the timeline, etc., using the classic, primary colors and basically just modified versions of what we saw in the original series makes sense from a storytelling perspective. But with Discovery, we're not seeing that. We're seeing brand new costumes, which are, certainly influenced by what we've seen throughout the history of the franchise, but are by no means like a copy of something which is iconic. And to me, I wonder, like, if they're going in that route, why not update what we're seeing here? I'm not saying like have it be, this really cheesy material and blah, 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 but I'm saying like do what they did in the JJ movies, only with these costumes, update them for a modern production, but use this as sort of like the template to do that. I mean, what does everybody think about that? I mean, Aaron, let's start with you since you've studied the costumes on Disco more than probably anyone else, aside from the costume designers themselves.
I would have liked to have seen that because I think there's some really interesting things here. I can see the bits and pieces that they took from Enterprise and from the Cage that sort of been woven into the new costumes.
Woven.
Yes, ha ha ha. But I do think that there goes Bobby and Annette from the Mouseketeers going down the hallway. Sorry, that was always really odd to me. And I don't know. I think that
I had a phone like that. when I was a
what they have is cool, but I really think that they could have updated the television. Sorry. I think they could have taken a more iconic look.
Well, what does everyone else think about this?
I like the looks of these costumes. I mean, the color. What's the word I'm looking for here? The field that they've chosen to use the grays, like it's not quite bright. I really
The
like
color
watching
palette.
the cage. Thank
Yeah,
you,
the
palette,
tone
that's
is
what I'm
nice.
looking for. I don't know. I really like that look to the cage, and that's
The bridge is also like that too, which is
yeah. I really like that a lot. I don't know. I think it looks cool.
I feel like that gets back to kind of what we were talking about a few weeks ago when we were looking at the evolution of television and the idea of the colors in the original series being designed as basically like, material to show off this new tech. Whereas here they were just like, whatever, we're making a show and it's in color and we're going to, just shoot it the way that we shoot these things. You know what I mean? I don't know. But what about you, Amy? What do you think about the costumes for Discovery and how they relate to what we're seeing here?
Well, I'm very curious to know this doctor's getup. Like, that looks a little strange. I've never seen this jumpsuit, I guess. Is that what that is?
Yeah,
Just came out
And-
of surgery.
Is that what it is?
I don't know.
So, yeah, I really enjoyed seeing the costumes at Star Trek Las Vegas, and I don't really see the connection. I like that, like, this one is your shirt and pants, and I think they're keeping with that two-piece and not doing the jumpsuit like we see here with the doctor. So.
Notice his badge is also smaller and they're shaped slightly differently. And
And
It's an
are they
Earth.
sewn
It's like
onto
a
the
planet.
shirt? So then the communicator, that's not obviously a communicator.
no,
that's
that didn't
an
happen until
emblem.
TNG.
Yeah.
Amy, your TNG fandom is showing.
Sorry.
Internally,
That's
they call
okay.
that the Flying A, the badges. Which later I'll point something out that might explain why.
So are they on Discovery going to have the sewn on?
No, they have the
Looks
metal
like a
badges.
clip on.
Yeah.
You guys
So
remember
what's
this guy from
the
the Twilight
purpose of
Zone?
that?
He was that three-armed alien in Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up?
Oh, interesting.
It's a great episode of Twilight Zone.
I mean, like, I can understand, like, them using metal badges and stuff like that instead of, that, or even modifying them to a degree in order to do whatever they want them to do. I mean, it's got to have its own identity and all that stuff. But I do kind of wonder why they didn't choose to, at the very least, like, go with the two-toned uniform thing by division. Like, have, I mean, take the costume, literally the same exact costume that you have on Discovery, and have half of the people wearing gold instead of blue. It's an interesting choice, and I'm kind of curious as to why they didn't choose to do it that way.
The scene that we just saw was very reminiscent of Bones and Kirk in Star Trek Beyond, by the way. I was like,
For the costumes with the blue, though, I think that what they're probably doing is to tie it back to Enterprise, because Enterprise had the blue jumpsuits, right? So that's why I think they've decided to keep with the blue
I
and
love
the
this
not
bridge.
much color for Division.
Sure. I can kind of see that. And I guess, like, again, that gets back to sort of like storytelling and the idea that is the last thing that we saw, literally. And, that's what's going to be fresh in people's minds. And people don't think about these two random episodes of the original series when they're thinking of costumes. But at the same time,
This is how I
There's
want
gonna
the
be-
warp drive to look.
I know,
in
I love this
Discovery, too.
transition.
Yeah, with the music playing. La, 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 la.
It's interesting that this episode is an hour and 3 minutes long. Like, I wonder what, maybe they just weren't even really considering things like, I mean, because there
what?
only seems to be like one act break and everything. But boy, like
Yeah, it's a weird time slot, right? Like what
Yeah.
type of time slot were they going to put that in?
Yeah, it would be like an hour and 15 minutes or something.
I think it
back
might be
then,
because
but-
this was reconstructed in the 80s, that they may probably just pulled out stuff that they would have edited and put it together and made a longer episode than you would have actually seen.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility for sure. But that little sequence there of the Enterprise flying, like, boy, that could go in a heartbeat.
Yep.
You know.
What?
Yeah.
If you were editing it for television, yeah.
Or anything, or for life.
Oh, you'd edit out the ship in the motion picture too, probably then.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
Because that serves a purpose,
Okay.
and that is, very interesting on a lot of levels.
Realize
and
this
all
is the
that
first
stuff.
time we've seen this ship fly, though. The idea of the Enterprise zipping through space is something we don't know anything about at this point. If we had seen the show,
That's great. Are you really conveying the Enterprise flying through space by doing lap dissolves between people on the bridge, like making weird hand gestures?
Well, that's
and
true. I
just
had the-
stars going across in the background. I mean,
No, I
that
had
doesn't
the-
exactly convey the speed and the majesty of Enterprise.
I
you know
have
what I
the
mean?
the more updated graphics, so that probably is the difference. But yes,
Oh,
Okay, I
well,
want to
that's a
point
cheat.
out. Sorry to interrupt here.
Yep.
See that guy that just gave him the paperwork? Do you notice he's got a Band-Aid on his neck? You can't see it now.
Yeah.
That's
I
Yeah.
was just gonna bring that up. Like, why is that? And then the guy at the con or whatever has a thingy
he's
on his
got
hand.
Band-Aids on his hands, and you'll notice that there's that Spock when he goes down to the planet will be limping, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, right? But Spock will be limping a little bit when we get down to the planet. So we'll bring
It's
it
because in the story, it's because they discuss how they just had that big thing
The big
happen
fight, yeah.
on
He lost
on whatever it
6
was.
crewmen or whatever the number was.
Yeah, and they're basically just got the crap kicked out of them, and you're seeing the results of that, which is really interesting
I love that so much.
in terms of like storytelling, because it's like, wow, that's like more continuity than we've seen.
this here, what we're
throughout the
seeing,
entire
like the uniforms
series.
and stuff. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
this
no.
is more like what we're seeing in Discovery. I feel like
I love these
it's like they
jackets.
pulled this more into
Yeah.
the new uniforms than the
Yes, I would
standard
agree.
duty uniform, and especially with the stuff
Transporter.
underneath it, and like those bandolier kind of things. And
No glasses.
I want to see 2 people running the transporter in Discovery. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, right. Just the idea of having like away team uniforms that are different from, that's really cool.
I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of like Starfleet branding, judging by like all the stuff that we saw at Comic-Con and Star Trek Las Vegas. That logo is on absolutely everything and
Everywhere.
every surface. It's like, I get it, you're in Starfleet. It's like
Some people just like the flying A. It's a fashion statement.
yeah.
I mean, hey.
So is he limping?
So one thing so you can see on their coats, they've got the 2 pockets in the front.
Yeah.
But like Discovery, they've got pockets everywhere.
See Amy, see Spock's limping?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Okay, I want to mention something here for like something really obscure. So this sound of this plant, have you guys ever heard of a band called Tangerine Dream?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Their first album, Electronic Meditation, which I've got right here, like literally the sound of this plant is like reminds me of like the music on this first album of theirs. Like it's that crazy prog German rock bizarreness. I love it. It's awesome.
Oh, and we have Spock smiling.
Woo! Look at those.
We do have Spock smiling, and look at that phaser, which is really similar to the phaser in Disco with the
end
3
part, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a nice nod, I think, to this era.
They did a good job with the props. That so far, I've give them props for the props.
Those shimmering plants, honestly, are like one of my favorite things in the original Star Trek series. I love those plants. I think that is so cool.
It's funny
For the longest time, I couldn't tell whether or not we were supposed to see the stems, or whether they just assumed that people would think that they were just floating in midair.
The funny thing is, like, those are very 1960s stuff that you would have in your house. My grandparents had plants that were like, they weren't blue, but they were like almost exactly the same design. And I would sit there and shake the plant and,
And then stop it and
Yeah.
then smile.
No, because I think that didn't come out to the 80s, but it's like it had a very Star Trek-y kind of, alien plant.
Man, yeah. Hey, if someone like QMX decided to start, selling those plants like on Think Geek or something,
Yeah.
I would totally buy those for my
Well, I guess
house.
they did have this. They had the part of where they integrated this episode into what is the episode?
The Menagerie.
Yeah, the Menagerie. So maybe they did show it.
Which,
There had to have been
if
a
I'm
reason
not
for
mistaken, was the original title for this episode was The Menagerie, but then when they used it for the...
Oh, they changed it to the cage.
Yeah. And there's one line in here where they're like, we're in a menagerie, a cage. And it's like, hey, you just covered all the bases in one sentence. Good job, guys. These dudes freaked me out when I was a little kid. And by little, I mean like 13 years old.
I always thought they were the same aliens that were in the Empath.
Yeah. Maybe they are. I don't
Hey,
know.
so who's that young kid next to the captain?
Well, that's really
Bina.
interesting, if you ask me, in relation to Discovery, because I have
Jose,
a theory.
yeah.
I've got two theories about this. His name is Jose Tyler. And when the first, sort of announcements were made about various people being in the show, I think it's Shazad Latif is playing Lieutenant Tyler.
But he
And I
wasn't
was like,
originally. It was Ken Mitchell, who looks a lot like this guy.
No, Ken Mitchell. No, Latif was playing the guy who Ken Mitchell was playing, and Ken Mitchell wasn't playing anyone.
I thought
So then
Ken Mitchell
Latif moved.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
Latif was playing Cole, but then Latif became Tyler, and then Mitchell became Cole. So other way around.
I thought they
But-
just flopped the roles.
No, I don't. I don't think so.
Which is
pretty
why
sure
I thought
Mitchell
originally
came
he
in.
was Jose Tyler, because he looked so physically similar and stuff, and it has a different name
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, now it's Ash Tyler, which when I saw that, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
man.
me too.
But I wonder if that was the initial intent, because it sounds like this dude is not going to be like part of the Discovery's crew or whatever. He's a prisoner of war. So he could have easily been,
Yeah, he was just
floating
a
out in
Starfleet
space
officer.
Yeah. So I wonder if that was the initial intent. And then here's the other thing, which I'm super curious about. And I mean, in early interviews and stuff, Fuller has talked about how for a brief moment they were considering making the character of Michael Burnham number one as we see here in this show. And that makes a lot of sense to me in terms of sort of like the creation of the character of Burnham. Because think about it, like the original intent here was for number one to be the Spock-like emotionless
Yep.
computer, whatever, even though she's a human.
And
so
she's
then
not
they
human
need
in
to,
the books, but yeah.
okay, so they need to ditch her, and they take all those attributes and apply them to Spock. So now you're doing a new show where for a brief moment it's number one, and hey, why is she acting this way? Why is she acting like a Vulcan? Oh, because she was raised by Vulcans, right?
Yep.
And also, like, you've got her starting off on a ship which isn't Discovery, the Shenzhou or whatever. Now, obviously, tons and tons and tons of stuff has changed, but I'm just saying, like, at the very beginning, like, the very start of this concept, was it originally going to be the Enterprise instead of the Shenzhou? I don't know. I mean, it just, there's something about that. Like, all of the pieces just kind of line up perfectly in order for that to kind of happen. I mean, obviously, it changed very, very, very quickly.
Right.
But I'm just curious about the very, very, very early origins of
Love the sound
this
effects
show.
of them turning the
I'm
phaser.
just curious.
Like,
Is that tumbleweed supposed to protect that guy? Like he's hiding behind that tumbleweed.
mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's adamantium tumbleweeds.
So I'm wondering, I have another question for you. I remember, very limited, of course, but so here we have this episode, and there's quite a few episodes that are on planets. What percentage of episodes do you think that we will see in Discovery that are actually on planets? Or do you
50%.
think that they're not going to go that way? 50%?
50%.
Is that what it is in TOS?
No, it's like way higher in TOS. It's probably like
Right.
80.
That's what so that's my question. Do you think it's going to follow that pattern of planet versus space?
No, I would say we'd probably get a lot
Episodes.
more on the ship.
Yeah, it seems like it.
I don't know. I mean, that's always been a weird thing for me because, like, I mean, that was sort of one of the things when, like, Beyond came out. Like, I was kind of disappointed, especially in all the trailers and stuff. I'm like, boy, they're like running around a planet, a whole bunch on this movie. And like when I think about Star Trek, like in my mind, I think of it as being, like a space-based show, a ship-based show. But really, like you're saying, Amy, like the original series, they do not spend all that much time on the ship. There's a lot of stuff with people running around on, crazy planets and stuff. And that really is a big part of the series. And I wonder, here, we see them already, like, going to
what is
very, like, exotic locales for filming and stuff, going to other continents and stuff, which is crazy for a TV show. And I'm wondering, I think that question is really interesting, and I'm very curious to discover the answer to it.
Okay, that bird was totally in reverse.
Sometimes birds like to walk backwards,
Like the footage of it, like the way that it's...
made it look more alien or whatever.
Amy, you should cosplay as one of these guys.
They're recorded by, or it was, I think most of them are women.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think they all are, aren't they?
So I'm assuming the bigger the brain, the smarter and more intelligent you are.
In this particular case.
That's not their brain.
Well, that's the 60s thought, at least of how...
Yeah.
I wonder how... I mean, like, I've often thought about this episode and, thought, like, okay, take out Captain Pike, put in Captain Kirk. Is there really a difference? Is there really anything... I mean, aside from your typical modifying of character in order to fit the actor who has been cast, is there really any difference between the way that this character is written and the way that Captain Kirk is written in Where No Man Has Gone Before?
I would say not the way they were written, but
Yeah.
the way they're acted, I think. Like, I think that Jeffrey Hunter could have been Kirk in Where No Man Has Gone Before. But yeah, I would say that they're written very similar. They're just acted differently, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Jeffrey Hunter feels like the, Captain Picard of the 60s as it compared to Shatner, which is the Kirk of the 60s, I guess.
Well, last night, my wife and I actually watched Encounter at Farpoint, and my wife turned to me and she said, Picard is very much like Kirk in this first episode.
What?
She thought.
Oh,
I kind of thought, yeah. a
This
little
thing
bit
here
he
that
is,
you're
yeah.
seeing, it's called an amplicall, which was a 1930s through 60s conference phone system, and their logo looks nearly identical to the badge. It has an A and has a star in it, and that's why I think that's why they called it the Flying A. I'm guessing that idea came from the instruction manual from that device. Nobody really knows what the background is for the design, so I know Larry Nemechek has talked about it, and nobody ever really talked to Matt Jeffries about it. So, anyway, sorry, that's what I was bringing up at the time.
It's interesting, yeah. And speaking of, like, Spock going from one slide to another, like, we saw something earlier in the episode where he uses his little hand wavy thing to go from one slide to the other on the view screen, which we never see again. But, like, hey, now that's like a real thing that people can do.
And I swore that's what that was, and I've had so many people tell me it's like, no, it's just him directing somebody to change it. It's not him actually doing it. I'm like, I would rather believe that it's a motion control, like a hand gesture.
Yeah, I've always interpreted
Yeah.
that he was changing the slide with his finger.
Yeah.
I always have interpreted that.
I think that's a much cooler idea.
Yeah. I wonder what they... Like, if this pilot had been picked up, I wonder which of these characters would have continued. Because, like in the original series, there's lots of times where you see crew members and they're like... I mean, think of, like, Galileo 7 and the people involved, there and everything, where you think, like, well, this guy could straight up be a regular on the show, but he's not. This is the only episode that he's in. Like, I wonder which of these characters would have continued and become regulars, maybe perhaps replacing people like Scotty or whatever. I mean, you got to figure.
Well, Tyler for sure.
You think Tyler? Because I mean, he's sort of like him and the Yeoman. I think are the two who would be on the bubble. I think we would definitely see Pike, number one, Boyce, and Spock, right?
Right.
So then,
I think Tyler and the Yeoman for sure.
So that would be 6. That'd be cool.
Because Rand was supposed to be like a regular, basically, but because the publicity stills from the early episodes had her in it, and like she had the issues behind the scenes. So, Amy, so what's going on now is they've put him into an artificial scenario in his mind to try and like excite him and entice him to win this woman's heart, and they're recreating the planet that they just left where they had that battle and his crew members died and everybody was injured. So they're recreating what's recently happened in his mind, which is on Rigel
7.
Which one was this? Rigel 7? Which Rigel 10 was the snow planet in Broken Bow on Enterprise.
Oh.
And Rigel 2 was, I think, the mining colony for Mudd's women.
Yeah, I've recognized that name.
Yeah, Rigel. Rigel, like every planet in the Rigel system is like inhabited. I think Rigel 6 is where... I had looked this up at one time. Rigel 6 is where Geordie LaForge ended up living with Leah Brahms in the future in All Good Things, right? Something like that anyways. So I could be off by, it might have been Rigel 4.
Might be off by a Rigel or two.
Might be off by Rigel or two. This is my favorite music in all of Star Trek. So, like, I love the music for The Cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before. Like, that disc, when I had it, I listened to it so much. But this fight music with the tuba in it, I don't know, I love this music. So.
There is a lot of good music. I mean, obviously a lot of that music from the original series was reused in various episodes, and you kind of think of certain things in certain contexts. But it's interesting, like, watching this episode, which is obviously the very first one, and being like, oh, that's where it came from. That was the original use of this piece. It's kind of interesting how many truly iconic pieces of music from the original series were recorded for this very first episode.
Right. And I did an interview on Melodic Treks with Gerald Freed, who's the only surviving composer of the original series, and I asked him, I'm like, so when you were composing your music for an episode, like, did you know that they would be using it as library music? And he said yes. And I said, so did that affect how you were composing it? And he said, no, we were still composing for that episode that we were assigned to score. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they really tried to score the episode that it was from.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're supposed to be talking about Discovery, and I just keep talking about this.
Well, we are also doing a watch along.
I mean, we're definitely talking about what's going on in this episode.
Somebody who needs dental work. I don't know.
Do you think we will see one of these aliens in Discovery?
We better. Oh, I love this music so much. Yeah! Melodic Treks.
Do you think we will see Pike on Discovery? And will he be played by Bruce Greenwood? I'll take that as a no. Okay, yeah.
No, I don't think so.
I think, maybe we will see him somewhere down the line. I don't think he'll be played by Greenwood, which I think is kind of a shame. But I would love to see, like, Pike and Enterprise and everything. I mean, why not, right?
I think that would be great. I would love to see crossovers, for sure. Like, there's so many characters, and this is why I wanted an anthology show, is because there's so many things in the Star Trek universe that you could cover for a
We could
season.
also see, what's
like
his name from Doomsday, like, before, like...
Sure, why not? Have a season that leads up to it, where the final episode is them going to that star system, right? That's how the season ends.
Yeah, I mean...
That'd be great.
We could see Robert April. He's floating around doing what?
Oh, that's gotta hurt.
Goodbye, I'm turning around.
Oh, you gotta see Amy's face. She's just like, ew.
Talking about scary moments.
So this is something which, I guess has been debated for years and years and years, but the idea that this episode is the one that got rejected, and Where No Man Has Gone Before is the one that got picked up.
Yeah, that's baffling.
How do you feel this compares to Where No Man Has Gone Before?
Where No Man Has Gone Before is my favorite episode of the original series.
Okay.
Hands down. So I'm happy with where I would love to have seen this as a show, right? But Where No Man Has Gone Before is my number one TOS episode, so I don't want to replace it with anything.
All right. Anyone else have any opinions on that? Nope. Okay.
Well, they're both.
That would
two
require
different
me to
universes,
remember
basically.
what Where No Man Has Gone Before is. So I know I've seen it. I just can't remember it.
It's the guy with the silver eyes and the ESP and the big energy.
It's
barrier.
Nova.
No.
You just read the Q books. The energy barrier
Yeah.
on the outside is the energy barrier from that episode, right?
Yeah, I know there was a connection. It just didn't stick with me.
Oh my goodness.
I always thought it was
It's
strange.
like a holodeck,
because-
but it doesn't break. She's talking about.
I mean, just the idea that, like, this episode was rejected because it was too cerebral compared to Where No Man Has Gone Before, and Where No Man Has Gone Before, they amped up the action, supposedly. Like,
They
that does
amped up the
not
melodrama. I don't know so much
guess
the
so.
action.
Well, but that was what they would always say. Like, we
Yeah.
wanted something which was more swashbuckling.
You
or
want people
whatever.
throwing rocks at each other, basically. It's what it turned out to be.
I mean,
You're such a walking freezer unit, Aaron.
this is like what we're seeing here is a pretty action-packed hour of television.
Yeah.
You know.
When you're talking about what
Yeah.
characters wouldn't survive, I think we kind of know that, unfortunately, Majel Barrett's character would not have survived because she didn't, basically, into the second chance. Like, the second pilot basically gives you an idea of what the actual show would probably be like because it was.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I think maybe what I was thinking was like what was originally who was intended to be like continuing characters. And
Well, they
maybe there's
basically
maybe an
merged
end to that.
Spock and her together because Spock would have been more like puckish and sort of like a little bit more like Loki kind of, he was supposed to be sort of mischief maker kind of type, with the ears and everything. It was, they didn't really iron the character out much, but he wasn't supposed to be cerebral, non-feeling, et cetera, et cetera. They just kind of blended her character into his.
Yeah.
And a lot of what Spock became was because of DC Fontana, so.
So what is her job? What is Majel Barrett's?
She's
What's
the
her
first
job?
officer. She's
Riker.
She's Riker. She's Burnham. I mean, she really is Burnham in a lot of ways. Whether or not that was, but I think it really was intended. Like even if once they decided like it's going to be a new character, I think this character really was the basis for Burnham in a lot of ways. I mean, just sort of like her place in history, the idea that she's a first officer, all that stuff. I mean, it does make a lot of sense, but it seems like this would have been a cool character. And it also seems, I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in this episode because, I mean, there's like the whole thing where he's talking to the yeoman and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I just can't get used to there being a woman on the bridge. And then number one shoots him a look. And he's like, "Oh, I of course I don't mean you.
Not you. Yeah.
You don't count." And then she shoots him another look, like, "What the heck is this guy's problem?" And I think that's really strange because obviously the reason for that interaction was to comment on equality and sort of at least start to make some sort of progress in that regard. But at the same time, by doing that, you're basically throwing your hero under the bus, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is a really interesting choice. And I don't know. It's super bizarre choice. But
Maybe she's a character that we could see. It'd be interesting to have number one basically show up. It's like it's very it's like I don't know, that might be too many similar type of characters showing up at one time, but like it's a possibility, I suppose, for like a guest star or something.
yeah, why not? Right?
They gave her a name in that Legacies trilogy from last year. They called her, I don't remember what race of alien she was. I can't remember. But apparently her name was so hard to say that the shortened version
Una,
was Una, which is like a double reference to Una McCormick, as well as Una like being a number one, Uno or something like that. So I'm like, oh, grown, but, cool, but grown, but cool, but grown, but cool.
That's Star Trek.
That's what, I said that's sort of some fan servicey things,
Just as a little.
Oh, I'm reading some of like the old ones, and there's like Ensign Marco Palmieri, and like they had all these people that were like working on the novels like listed as characters in the books and stuff.
Well, Dayton does that a lot too.
Lieutenant
Like
Keith
grab people that
DeCandido.
like you're reading the book and you're like, oh, Ensign John Cooley or whatever. It's like okay.
Kayla Iacovino was a character in a book.
Well, Matt Rushing had like a ship or something named after him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did, and so Christopher Jones had a character.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes, he was a captain.
Yeah, David Mack, if you're listening, I would like to be a Section 31 agent, please, in your next novel.
I need to be somebody connected with the animated series somehow. Now, that's a character would be interesting. It's like, see Emrys or Eric's or something. It's like they both would be alive and in Starfleet at this time too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess like what we see on Yesteryear would probably be the area in the animated series which would most likely be tackled.
We're flashing back to when around that time period when we're seeing Burnham as a child. So I think it's probably a couple years before that, but not a whole lot.
Yeah, it's got to be a couple years before that because she's like 10 years older than Spock.
It'd be interesting if Ichaya was actually her pet first, before Spock.
And then we could write the novel how she gets mad at him. You killed my pet.
That's what Dayton Ward's book is going to be. They said
That's why they're
an
not
important
found.
event.
There you go.
10 years prior to the whatever
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
The death of Ichaya. Okay, now
I love
I
that
talked
glass.
about this with Colin on From There to Here last year. I was convinced until like a year and a half ago that this was Hansel and Gretel.
What?
I don't know why.
I was thinking
that this was like the oven that they were cooking the witch in, because she says from a fable of your youth. So I'm like, this is like the oven. I don't know. Until like not even 2 years ago, I was convinced that's what they were talking about.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, I think I'm sure, as you know
Hansel
now,
and
it's
Gretel.
I'm assuming it's supposed to be hell, and him saying like the fable from your youth is a way of Roddenberry very slyly commenting on the idea of religion being
a fable,
mythology,
right.
So
I like my version better than Hansel and Gretel. I don't know, but.
Okay, I mean, what you're saying, like we're laughing at it, but it really does sort of make sense in that sort of like childhood kind of thing, like a fable from your youth. Oh, Hansel and Gretel, it all lines up because that's a fable from my youth. Yes,
I love their the necklaces that the Telosians are wearing. It looks sort of like an old-fashioned 30s microphone, like the center part of it.
Isn't that the same necklace that Bones had in Star
Not
Trek
quite.
Adventure? He went back to Talos 4.
Spock got it for him. He's like, "Here, Doctor, Merry Christmas." Just had it lying around. Yeah.
So I don't know. Let's talk about what do you guys think about Hunter versus
Hunter.
Shatner? Because they act very differently.
It is really interesting to look at, you see like these documents and everything from back in the day where like Shatner was considered to be like a huge get at the time. That was like a substantial upgrade when they were able to land Shatner. And,
Well, I don't understand that. Honestly, it's like, he was in the Twilight Zone and a couple other things, but it's like he doesn't seem any more competent or less competent than Hunter.
It's because he's Canadian.
I mean,
So
like,
that's a
Hunter-
detriment. I get it, but they still hired him.
No, it's awesome.
He can't pronounce
We have
words like
poutine.
sabotage.
He pronounces sabotage exactly the way it should be pronounced.
I always think that he's when he's on Earth and the picnic and everything. This always reminded me of something that the $6 Million Man would wear. It's got that sort of 70s leisure suit kind of jacket thing.
This, you know what this looks like? Is it looks like the sort of like whatever they're calling it, like the away team thing, but with like without the life vest sort of thing, like without the flak jacket.
Oh yeah,
you know.
Tango.
But yeah, no.
it's
I mean,
Hoppers.
like I can totally see. I mean, Hunter is obviously a really good actor. I mean, I don't know. Shatner, to me, in a lot of ways, sort of like embodies that role, and I just love
Hunter
his
seems
acting.
much more Kennedy-esque of the time period than
Yeah.
Shatner. Shatner seems cowboy-ish compared to I guess he fits that if you're going to do Western in space, but if you're actually doing what Star Trek became, Hunter fits much better.
Perhaps, yeah. I don't know. I think Shatner. I mean, there's just something about his acting style and everything which I really respond to. When he's got the right material, he's super great. So, and I think Shatner and Star Trek are a good fit. I know that's a crazy, groundbreaking thing for me to say.
I have a
think
hard
that,
time separating at this point because it's been 50 years. We've, people on the network like us, we analyze this stuff. We know about. It's like, for me, it's really hard to pull Shatner apart from Kirk, and I have problems with the actor. So for me, it's like I have problems with Kirk sometimes. I just have to I really have to okay, this is not the actor, this is the character. But I still would have liked to have seen Hunter because he seems more measured, more calm. There's just something more commanding about him. Kirk seems like your friend. Like, he's the fun captain. Hunter feels like the competent captain.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's just my opinion.
I don't know if I've seen Hunter in anything else. I know that he
passed away
he
relatively
played Jesus
quickly
in a movie
after
or
this, I
something,
think.
didn't he? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've seen him in anything else. But.
He has a very tiny cameo in this great movie called A Guide for the Married Man, which was directed by Gene Kelly and stars Walter Matthau, and it's pretty hilarious. So I would definitely recommend that movie, even though he's literally in one shot. But
It would be interesting to see how he handles comedy, like how he would have, if he was in a piece of the action or something like that. How could he have done the same? Because I think Shatner does really well with those pieces. He can balance the comedy and not be goofy. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's
Shatner's a much better comedian than he is a dramatic actor in a lot of ways, and I think that's kind of where he's found his his true calling in recent years.
Where Hunter, I
And-
really don't know how he would have been able to do that, or if the stories just
Yeah.
would have been written differently because of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. This is such a great pilot. I don't know why this wouldn't have got picked up. It's a great pilot, I think.
No, it's definitely true. I mean, I guess you got to sort of put yourself in the mindset of a network executive, right? Is it something that people
In
would
the
tune
60s.
into in the 60s? Yeah, I don't know. It's I mean, really interesting how the pilots have evolved in a lot of ways, because this show, I mean, they're selling, right? I mean, to the point of they need to make another one and be like, how about now, guys? Whereas, by the time Next Generation rolled around, it was we're doing a quote-unquote pilot, but it really wasn't a pilot. It's not like they were going to watch that episode and be like, maybe not. Because if they were going to do that, there would have been no Next Generation. Because I don't know if you guys have seen Encounter at Farpoint, but that episode is not good.
Careful there.
That's not that bad.
No,
That's
it's
Not that good
good.
either. Hey, I was 17
it
and
a
I
3.5
saw
out
that there
of
were
5.
flaws with that thing. It pilots used to be a lot
You're a lot
rockier
older.
than they are now. They do when by the time you hit Voyager, you might not love Voyager, but the way the pilot was put together was pretty polished and pretty somewhat, good pacing and consistent. TNG is really interesting to watch, but it does have you're like, wow, these characters are really odd, and they're just and there's some just makeup choices and lighting, and but their budget was not as cheap as this, but their budget was very different than what it was in later years, for sure.
Well, in a lot of ways, I think maybe the guaranteed success of Encounter at Farpoint is what led to its downfall. In that, they wanted it to be an hour and a half, and then the network or the studio wanted it to be 2 hours. So they literally padded out that thing, and you can.
That's how
totally
Q
tell.
showed up, right?
Yeah, that's the interesting part is that
We did get Q, which
the
is
stuff that was added is the stuff that actually hit,
Yeah.
whereas the stuff that was originally intended was a total miss. This is a bizarre scene and a bizarre subplot. The whole thing of
Orion.
I don't know if I want to be a captain anymore. Maybe I want to go into slave trade.
Okay, I want to
Harry
talk
Mudd.
about that for a second, okay? So that's never how I've interpreted this, because the way that I've always interpreted this episode is that Pike is all frustrated with being a captain because he's tired of who lives and who dies and what he says. And so he just says the most ludicrous thing on his mind, which is, well, maybe I'll be a slave trader of Orion's. And so they put him in this situation.
That's an interesting
Does
uniform.
nobody see his facial expressions when he's sitting here? He is not comfortable in this situation in any way, shape, or form.
I see what you're saying. I guess it's Boyce's reaction where he's like, "Oh, come on," that doesn't
Exactly, because he said something ludicrous.
Okay, but
fine then, I'll just go and I'll go work at Burger King.
But I guess
Or I'll just go sell slave women or something. And so that's what's in his mind. But look at his face.
But is he looking at it
You
like
tell
that
me he's
because it's
enjoying
Vina,
himself
or is he
here?
looking at it because it's a slave?
no. I think
I don't
I think that morally he's like, no, this is not okay. But I think that first line, I mean, you could read it like Brandon is saying, but if you do that, then Boyce's line doesn't make any sense because Boyce wouldn't even dignify it with a response. He'd just be like, "Shut up, you whiny baby," Whereas
I can hear him say that too.
if he did mean it, even if it was just to sort of get a reaction out of Boyce, then there's some part of him, at least as he presents himself, which is saying maybe I could do this. At which point you're like, the hell is wrong with you, man? Seriously, even if you say that as something which is kind of an option, you're really messed up. You know what I mean? So I don't know. To me, I can see it working either way, but you can't have it both ways.
I love
You
this
know what
hallway,
mean?
by the way. Sorry.
Just remember, though, okay, at canon now, she's actually the one in charge, right? Because they did that in Bound.
Yeah, that's cool.
I love these backpacks that they have. It also looks very much like because I think they had this episode as what they worked into the British comics in the 70s or late 60s, early 70s.
I mean, you look at Majel Barrett here, and sort of her presence on screen and everything like that, and it's so different from the other roles that she's played, whether it's Nurse Chapel or whether it's Loxana Troy or the voice of the computer, and she really has a
Wait for the women.
Yeah. She really has a commanding presence on screen, and I almost feel like even though she isn't really given much to do here, this is sort of her best performance and her best role. I would have loved to have seen her continue on the original series because I think she really would have killed it in the same way that Nimoy did. You know what I mean?
And I think some of the behind-the-scenes stuff was sort of do we really want Jean's girlfriend to be the person who's in the show? And, I think that's...
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of... Unfortunately,
sure.
the politics... not politics, but the personal interactions of the actors and the directors played into a lot of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I don't know what you guys were talking about. I was waiting for my cue to shout the women, so I'll catch it on when I listen to it again here.
That is a very bizarre cut.
Yeah.
It's like a medium shot of him. He drops the phasers onto the ground. The camera tilts down, and then we immediately cut to the same exact scale shot from the same exact angle, only with the camera back up, on his... It's a sloppy edit. I don't know. I don't like it. It's bad.
It'd be interesting to compare how the editing of this to the other shows of the era? Like how much is the editing different? Is it just pretty much the same? Cut. Like.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, I haven't done like a thorough comparison or anything like that, but like
shame
I've
on
watched
you.
some. Sorry, but I've watched some Mission Impossible, which is obviously like the sister show
Right.
to Star Trek in a lot of ways, and I hadn't seen any Mission Impossible until a few years ago when we were talking about it on Commentary Trek Stars, which you can find right here on Trek.fm, and it's weird because I always had this impression that like the visual style and everything of the original series was extremely progressive, and they were doing like things which were way outside of the box for the era and everything, whereas when you get into the next gen era, it's much more subdued. It's much more sort of
It's like season 3
paint by numbers, sort of
Yeah.
like filmmaking, like very, very efficient, but also very, very by the book. And it's like the Savick of filmmaking. Whereas this is like the Kirk of filmmaking. And when I started watching Mission Impossible, same exact era and everything, same exact studio, all that stuff, I was like, wow, like as progressive as Star Trek may have been, like Mission Impossible was taking it to a whole other level in terms of like not only the photography, but also the editing. So, I mean, I think that this show was sort of ahead of the curve in that respect, but I think they were being bested by Mission Impossible at the same time. So, sorry, Star Trek, you lose.
You just had the Hansel and Gretel thing again.
Oh,
Okay, now there's like 4 of these aliens here. Aaron, we should totally write like a Star Trek fan film that's like the Golden Girls, but with the Telosians.
I'll let you do that.
Okay. Get David Goodman to help me write it.
Are you going to include somebody from the Alternative Factor?
Who?
I don't know, a character. Do you want me to actually remember that show?
Yeah, that's a great episode.
Yes, we
Number 2
also wrote a
episode.
sequel to it, remember?
Yeah, the animated show. Remember, there is an animated Star Trek.
There is.
so here they are. They're all captured, and here's where Captain Pike gets the upper hand. What do you guys think about Pike as he's presented here compared to how he's presented in the JJ movies? Because, like we've said, he's almost a blank slate here, right? I mean, we don't get to see him do much. We don't have much of a baseline in terms of what this character actually is. So, how do you feel they expanded on him for the JJ movies?
Sorry.
I think that they did a good job of they only had him for a little bit, right? Like he was only in the 2 movies, but Bruce Greenwood did a very good job of him, and I think he channeled Jeffrey Hunter well. And I don't know. I think there's only so much that they could do because the big scene with him is in 09 when he's talking to him in the bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like the big scene with him, right? But I don't know. I think they did a fine job in the movies in the Kelvin timeline.
It's something that I always think about, when I'm watching those movies and when I'm watching this episode, and I don't really see much of a connection between the two, but then again, I don't see anything which contradicts because he is such a blank slate in a lot of ways. But what I think is interesting about what they did in the original series is they sort of, in a sense, went kind of like, in the JJ verse, they went kind of meta with it, where it's like Captain Pike is, in a lot of ways, the godfather of Captain Kirk. Like spiritually speaking, like this is where Kirk came from. This is his origins and everything like that, even if it is only that one episode. So by making Pike Kirk's mentor in the actual story, I thought that was kind of an interesting way of sort of acknowledging Pike's place in the history while simultaneously, showing him on screen, letting him do his thing, and making it sort of all line up in terms of there being a captain of Enterprise and it not being some random person, but actually, yeah, I don't know. I think they did a good job with it.
What do you think so far, Amy?
Yeah, I like it.
Better
I've
or
seen
worse?
it before.
Better or worse than Encounter at Farpoint?
Well, this is one story. The one thing I don't like about Encounter at Farpoint, you guys already talked about, like the two mishmash of stories. And
I like that.
I
don't know.
If it was a two-parter, maybe, because then it could have like kind of led into like it'd have been like two different stories with a bridge. But
they just sort of mushed it all together.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that when Discovery airs, like the first episode and the second episode, that they go together, but they're more continuous and connected. Because the stories at Encounter at Farpoint, there's no connection.
because there
But
wasn't
I like
originally, that's
Encounter.
part of it too.
Yeah, right.
It'll be interesting to see exactly what happens with Discovery, but part of me feels like it being a 2-hour premiere is not the same as like what we've seen in the past. Like, it's not a 2-hour episode. It's just 2 episodes, the first 2 episodes that happen to air, and they're going to put them together. But is there going to be any more of a connection between episodes 1 and 2 than there is between episodes 2 and 3 or anything like that? I don't necessarily know that that's what's going to happen, obviously, since I haven't seen it, but I don't get that impression. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, with the way storytelling is nowadays, again, yeah, it's just each episode is a part of the continuous story arc. So I think you're right that it's, not like how the final 2 episodes of Enterprise were, where it was Terra Prime and These Are the Voyages, right, that are completely, that was their 2-hour finale, right? But it'll just be the first 2 chapters of this story is what we'll get.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Like, someone just posted a ad promoting like the first 2 episodes of Voyager with 7 of 9. It was like 2-hour premiere, Voyager Part 1, Voyager Part 2, but it was actually Part 2 and then next random episode. It really was just sort of like a 2-hour. I'm kind of like what they did with Enterprise. It's interesting.
They didn't do that for season 4.
That's what the ad said. I don't know.
No.
Okay, fine. For that random TV guy.
Because I
was
remember
wrong.
that you had to wait a week because we all knew that Jennifer Lean was leaving.
Yep.
But the trailer was like, for the next episode, was like, who's leaving? Somebody's leaving the show, right?
Could it be Janeway? No.
I don't know what to tell
I do
you.
like the effect of the veins pulsing on the brain. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that freaked me out.
See, could you look at these 3 people? Like these could totally be like the Golden Girls.
I believe this person here was in a lot of Elvis movies.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think I don't know the exact.
I don't think I've ever seen an Elvis movie.
She was on Portal 47 on Larry Nemechek's service.
Okay, so Scorpion Part 2 aired on September 3rd, 1997, and The Gift aired on September 10th, 1997. So I'm wondering now if maybe I was misreading the ad, and actually what they were doing was showing the season finale before the premiere. That would make sense, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Human adaptability.
So I guess one thing we could talk about while this is wrapping up is the menagerie. Well, how do you guys feel about how they, chopped it up and threw it in with that Spock on trial episode?
I think it's fascinating in terms of just, like production stuff. Like, it's a great repurposing of this basically save yourself some money. And I think that they did a really good job of integrating it. You know, you've got some weird things going on, like more than anything, Spock's personality just being bizarre. And I also have a problem with a few scenes in terms of like perspective and everything. But I mean, whatever, you're already dealing with some sort of weird thing where these guys are transmitting this video with their minds. So, you know, whatever, you can give a break to them in that regard. I think on the whole, it works really well, and it does a pretty good job of maintaining this story while telling like another larger story. And yeah,
Her beauty is fading.
Okay, now this is the part of the episode that I just don't buy, where they're like, oh, we found this baby and she was just a lump of flesh and we didn't know how to put her together. And it's like, yeah, because her body, you know, doesn't look anything like yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, with, like,
And you don't have a bunch of other humans to compare
like
it to.
dead
and,
humans around her.
and things aren't like symmetrical at all.
I mean, they did a good job with the fake humans before.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
No.
But that's okay.
But I can forgive it, that one little thing.
Mm-hmm.
They had the technology.
The director of this episode is Robert Butler, who's a guy who
Yes.
He's done tons and tons and tons of stuff. I was so jealous. A friend of mine took a class in L.A. where this guy was like the teacher, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
like, what? You know? But yeah, I mean, he directed the pilot for Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. He did the movie Turbulence. I mean, he's did everything. He worked for years and years and years and years and years. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that this is the first guy to direct Star Trek.
I may have actually met him then, because I think we had a class with the people from the first episode of Lois and Clark once. That's interesting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My writing teacher's husband worked on that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
See, in Vena's the fourth Golden Girl, she could be Blanche.
Someone at home is laughing at this stuff. I just know it.
I was like one person. It's Justin Ozer. He's like the only one. He likes the Golden Girls too.
You getting?
I love I was like 8 years old, and we
Is
would,
it the
like,
women?
watch the Golden Girls in Empty Nest while we ate supper.
No,
I
loved it.
I was rather partial to the Golden Palace myself. There's that one episode with
Oh, I remember
Bobcat
that show.
Goldthwait. Yeah. You know, they're making Golden Girls pop vinyls. You check them out.
Golden Palace. I forgot about that. And now the time for the announcement. We're going to do a commentary for a Golden Girls episode. We
See?
just lost Aaron.
No. Well, he'll be back. He'll be back.
Welcome back, Aaron.
I don't know what happened. Apologize.
It's okay. It's okay. We made it through those 2 seconds without you.
And then we get the joke, like the joke ending, I guess, kind of.
I guess, yeah. Now, the thing about this, which I kind of love, okay, because she's like, hey, Pike, who would have been Eve? And, like, almost immediately, like, number one goes all apone on her and is like, you secure that Hudson, or, you know. And I love how she just, like, snaps, like, you shut up right now, you know. I think that's pretty great, and really sort of like gives a lot of insight into what her character would have been like she's not, you know, the you know, Commander Riker, I'm your best buddy kind of, you know,
Right.
kind of guy. She's like, look, you guys need to stay in line, okay? I'm not going to put up with any of this stuff from any of you, you know. I love that. I think she would have been a really cool character.
What is this, a cadet ship? Oh, you Pike. Freeze frame.
Yes. And then there we go. We're flying away from Talos 4, and never shall we see it again. Ever.
Well, until the cage.
I can't tell the difference between what I've seen on the commercials for Discovery for special effects and these ones. They look the same to me.
I mean, after the responses to that initial teaser from back at Comic-Con a couple of years ago, you would think it was about the same, right? So,
Well, and then it's interesting now that the people who maybe aren't necessarily as happy with what they're seeing now would want to go back to that ship, which is hilarious to me. It's just like, oh, okay.
all right, so that was The Cage. It's interesting to see this stuff, especially when we're looking at what's going on with Discovery and it being essentially the same time period. Yes, a couple of years later, but, it'll be interesting to see how things in The Cage manifest themselves in the show. And it'll also really be interesting to read that David Mack book where he merges the two and, is able to somehow reconcile what's going on here with what's going on in the world of Discovery. So any final thoughts on The Cage, Amy?
The women!
No?
I love this episode. Yeah. I think it's a great pilot, honestly. I think this is better than Caretaker. Like, I don't know, like this is a really good episode of Star Trek, and I enjoy watching it. And
they both have sort of a farm kind of rural area in both of them, so you got that.
They just need a banjo man in this episode. That's all.
Offering corn,
but I'm excited to see this era of Star Trek. I think it's going to be really interesting. I know that's not what everybody wanted originally, but I mean, hey, Star Trek has got a vast universe that's not been explored, so I think it's going to be neat to check it out. And this was a lot of fun to watch this episode with in mind that this is going to be the time period that we're looking in. So I think that's kind of cool.
Aaron, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I feel it was really well put together. It was probably a pilot that was a little bit more ahead of its time, maybe, as far as the way it wasn't as action-oriented and more thoughtful. So I can see why they didn't choose it, but at the same time, it speaks to me more than some of the other TOS episodes of the era. So I can appreciate it for what it is and why they didn't, pick it up.
Amy?
Yeah, I like the episode, and to me, it is Trek. I mean, the storyline and all the technology that we saw and was introduced. I mean, it had a really good balance of stuff going on the ship, on the planet, and this cerebral, out of this mind controlling element, So I thought that it really exemplified what we now know as Trek, and so I look forward to seeing how Discovery is going to continue that.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you guys are saying. It really does capture the essence of Trek, even if it's not like, I mean, obviously it's a different era where everything is sort of designed to be mixed and matched however you want. So it's not like this is the first adventure of the Starship Enterprise.
Right.
But, I think it does that, thematically. Like, this is what we're going to be seeing, guys. So tune in next week. And, I also am intrigued by this era. Like, it would not have been my first choice, as far as, tackling an era in Star Trek's history, but I think that there's a lot of stuff in here that you can do, which could be really interesting. There was a comic book, I don't know if you guys remember, Star Trek The Early Voyages, which was basically, the TV show, but in comic book form. So this the comic book. Yeah. And it was only like 12 issues long or something like that. I think back when Marvel had the license in like the mid-90s or so. They've collected them all into a paperback at some point along the way. And those were really good, really interesting, where they really did develop these characters who we see for only a few minutes here into, sort of like a full-fledged crew. And, I'm curious to see what they do with this era, for sure. So, okay. Before we go, our big announcement, which, now everyone's, been hanging on forever, and they're going to hear the announcement and be like, that's it? Oh, great. I'm glad I wasted my time here. But
Way to sell it.
I'm just saying, lower your expectations. Like Nick Meyer says, lower your expectations, right? Okay?
Or that dating video on Mad TV.
There you go. Yes. We are going to be doing another sub show, which will air, or whatever you want to call it, weekly, along with each episode of Discovery, which will be called On Screen. And it is going to be a commentary show where we do commentaries for every single episode of Discovery. I'm going to be heading this one up myself, and I'm going to have, co-hosts along the way. First couple episodes, I'm going to have my co-host from Commentary Trek Stars, Max, come on and do those. And then after that, we will see what happens, and I think it's going to be fun because everybody loves commentaries, and we know that people are going to be watching this show like 15 times over the course of the week, so one of those times you can watch it while listening to me and my friends. So, that's going to be coming out on Wednesdays. Right after Discovery airs, every Wednesday after Discovery airs, and hopefully you'll check it out. Could be fun.
I'm just disappointed you didn't call it like Commentary Discovery Star.
I mean, the obvious one would be Trek Star Commentaries, right? Maybe it's not too late for that. I don't know. We'll figure that out. Whatever.
I like On Screen.
Okay. All right. Cool. So that's that. Look for that September 27th.
Yes.
Ish.
There you go. Okay, cool.
Yep. Wednesday's the 27th. So listeners, you've got now a Wednesday show to listen to, a Thursday show, the postcards, and a Friday show, our main, The Edge show.
Wow. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. What will we think of next?
What?
You should edit in here that Beatles song 8 days a week, and like we could be like doing Discovery podcasts 8 days a week.
Oh man, we would totally get sued for that. Beatles don't play. Well, it's been fun talking about the cage this week, but that's not all we're talking about on Trek.fm, so here's a look at what you may have missed elsewhere on the network.
Previously on Trek.fm, The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
I think there's a better chance of what happens in the comics reflecting the television show as opposed to like the first TNG comic that had like the two bickering husband and wives that worked on the bridge, the Bickleys or whatever, and they ran around in capes for some reason, and it's just like they had these
That's
really
canon
like
in my head. Yeah, that's
you're right.
To the journey!
And so I could see the Hirogen viewing themselves as very noble, very civilized. They don't let their prey suffer, but really they're doing these horrific things, just like we do here in the real world when we have to go fight wars.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they go home and they write an epic poem about it, and that makes it okay.
The Hirogen equivalent of Beowulf. Right?
Warp 5.
Gary Graham came over and said a couple of nice things, but the funny thing was he said, I've been on this show for 4 years. This is my first day on the bridge. You're over there firing the phasers? What is going on?
Standard Orbit.
I was really hoping that Quinto would have a tie-in to, when the Hobbit trilogy came out, a few years ago. I was like, oh, they might tie into that, and Quinto can have a remix of the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins. They didn't quite go there, did they? So
no, they did not. They did not. But, there are certain things that you can, I guess, mirror or remake that is not something that should ever be remade.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
So check out all these shows and join in on the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and the women. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, please be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on the iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and a written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, and in most Telosian fantasies. You can stream or download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link as well. Amy!
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place is to join the larger conversation in the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, Babel, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select The Edge. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Now, Mike, where can people talk to you about On Screen?
Oh, well, you can talk to me on Twitter at Mumbles3K, and you can also find me right here on Trek.fm doing a show called Stage 9, where we talk about the people who make Star Trek. This week, we're going to be talking about a rather interesting thing, if you ask me. You know, we're talking about pilots here. It was just announced that the pilot for Discovery, it was co-written by Brian Fuller and Akiva Goldsman. And this isn't the first time that Akiva Goldsman has adapted, if you want to say, a work from a Star Trek creator. He also did the script for I Am Legend, which was based on the book by original series writer Richard Matheson. So we're going to take a look at I Am Legend and talk about how awesome that movie is. And you can find that right here today on Trek.fm. You can also find me on thenerdparty.com doing a show called Great Shot Kid. And you can find me on my website, commentarytrackstars.com, where we've got over 400 commentaries just like this one, only with way more swearing. So head on over there and check that out. And yeah, what about you, Aaron? Where can people find you on the internet?
On the internet, you can find me on Twitter and Facebook and Google and wherever. Just put in Geek Filter and you'll come up with my name somewhere. You can also find me on the network. I host Saturday Morning Trek with sometimes Adam, sometimes Joe, and we talk about the animated series and all things Trek in the 1970s. And, you know, we've got a little bit of bleed over with Discovery, because some of the flashbacks that we see with Michael Burnham is around the time of yesteryear happening, and we've, you know, Spock's family back then. And so, yeah, join us and have some fun as we've been doing some rewatches lately, where we've just been commenting as opposed to doing the deep diving that we normally do. So it's been kind of fun. We've got all sorts of cute observations about how He-Man and Spock have the same backstory. So check it out. Brandon, where can we find you on the network?
I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to pulse my brain veins at you guys. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. You can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network with my friends Chris and Tom, where we have a show called Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast, which we go through the Alfred Hitchcock movies one at a time, and we're deep in his silent era. You can find me here on the network with Melodic Treks. I still have 2 more to put out. You can find me also on Warp 5 with my buddy Floyd, where we discuss Star Trek Enterprise, which is a lot of fun, and I think you should definitely check it out. You can follow me on Twitter at Brandon-Shea. And Amy, do we still need your information?
Yeah, I think you do.
Where can people find you when you're not, slapping down that yeoman for asking about Eve?
Exactly. Well, you can find me on postcards from The Edge. That is our mailbag show. And we have started that going, and so you can look for that there. I'm also on the network on Earl Grey with my co-host Richard and Justin, and that we talk everything Next Generation, which is my favorite. You can find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, and my favorite place is on the Babel Conference on Facebook. That's where I like to hang out.
And at this time, we'd like to thank our 5 associate producers here on The Edge.
Woo-hoo.
We've got Norman Jose Tyler Lau, Tony Spock Robinson, Thomas Number 1 Puleo, Lisa the Telosian Brain Lady Slack.
There you go.
And Shoab the Transporter Dude Mirza.
Yeah, not a lot of characters in this episode. Sorry, guys.
There you go. We thank you, associate producers, for supporting us.
And if you guys want to be like them, head on over to patreon.com and become a patron of the network. Just visit patreon.com/trekfm. That's patreon.com/trekfm to get all of the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone, run by Brandon over there. It requires a great deal of money to produce and distribute these things, and we really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the info at patreon.com/trekfm. All right, well, that's it for The Edge this week. Hope you enjoyed The Cage. Now you're all ready for Disco. It's only a couple weeks away. Everyone's excited. I'm excited. You guys are excited. And, yeah, we'll be back next week to talk about something else on The Edge.